This episode of Linux Action Show is brought to you by GoDaddy.com.
And by Ting.com. Head over to last.ting.com and save $25 off your first device.
And welcome to the Linux Action Show, Season 27, Episode 2. My name is Chris.
My name is Matt.
Hey there, Matt. Welcome back to the Big Show.
Big Show.
Should I tell folks what we have coming up on the Big Show today?
Let's hear it.
All right, well, today we're going to give you our review of Mint 15. Both Matt and I have been kicking around the Cinnamon and Mate editions of the latest release from the Mint folks. And we'll also do a flash review of 5 new Linux games that you're going to want to go check out, some open source ones and some Steam games, especially a couple that are on sale, so you want to catch those for sure. Then, in the latter half of the show, our biggest feedback segment in a long time. Man, did you guys have a lot of things to say about last episode. Plus, we're going to do some giveaway games, so stay tuned for that because you will have a chance to win. And also, this is kind of something I think people might be looking forward to. We're going to cover some job boards that specifically target open source and Linux jobs. So if you're looking for a new gig and you want to focus in those areas, stay tuned for some resources on that. And then in the news segment, Matt, we're going to talk about the new Yola OS, right? Yola phone?
Yola.
Not Jolla. Not Jolla. Yeah, right.
Not Jolly.
No, not Jolla. And then, of course, Tizen's got some big news. Plasma, KDE's got some big news. Shuttleworth's been talking and slinging dirt. And, of course, Linus, well, we'll tell you all more about Linus as the show goes on. It's kind of funny. But, Matt, I thought, before we even got to the picks this week, and we got some really good picks this week, I just wanted to ask you kind of a question.
Sure.
Are you feeling more Canadian these days than you are American? Because I know you've been cut off from the rest of America now.
It definitely feels like one of those post-apocalyptic asteroid type situations due to our bridge.
Yeah, people haven't seen the news.
If you haven't seen the national, it's been all over the world.
Yeah, it probably not. It might have even made the global news. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's definitely made the national
BBC
news.
had it. Yeah, it was a big deal. So here's the local perspective. No one died. A few cars ended up in the water. Our first responders were awesome. This is here local to me.
Yeah, well, this is your town.
This is literally within almost walking distance. So it's a big deal. And more importantly, this is our corridor from Canada down through the rest of the state. Yeah. So it's a big economic
That's
deal.
why I say it's easier for you to get up to Canada now than it is to get down to Seattle.
Almost, yeah. It's a little tricky. So and I'm still working out the detours. It sounds like I have a detour. I think it'll work for next week, but it's just this. Yeah. So it's been pretty scary. It definitely puts things in perspective.
Yeah. So. It's pretty wild. It's been there since the 1955. So it's just been there our whole lives practically.
Well, basically, and a truck took it out. That was the whole thing of it. Yeah. I hate to be that guy.
Well, it was. No, it was a truck just hit a few of the joints on the thing, and it was just a chain reaction where the stress points were hit and it came down. It's amazing nobody died because, like you said, about 70,000 people drive across that bridge every single day, including you saw it yourself. So, all right, Matt. Yeah. Well, let me tell you about the picks we've got. Let's start with Runs Linux. This first one was sent in by Larry. I'm going to say Vasala Lightning Processor Pro runs Linux. It's the TLP 100 and the TLP 200 runs on top of Linux, and it is a revolutionary central processing technology for computers that tracks Lightning. And I've got a little video if you're watching the video version, where you could see the software in action where it's tracking lightning storms in real time, all running on top of Linux. And of course, this is one of those things that helps with weather data, it helps with climate studies, and it helps just save lives.
And it looks cool. Visually, it's very cool to watch. And I know it sounds really mediocre, but it's true.
It's fun to watch lightning.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool. We cover all kinds of different ways. Linux is in cars now. Linux is in watches. But come on, tracking lightning storms? That's pretty cool. That's an eclectic one that hadn't crossed my mind, even when I was imagining all of the things Linux would run. But it totally makes sense. So thanks to Larry for sending that in to us, because.
Are we safe in saying that Lightning runs Linux? have we almost come to that point, right?
I prefer to say our Lightning defense systems, right? Because then it sounds
that works, yeah. Right? It sounds a little less odd.
It's Lightning defense. I think it's funny, too, that, there's all these little, I don't know, would you call them utility purposes that are sort of singular in purpose that you never even think about because you're not in those industries, and then you come across me like this, and you're like, of course they would need something like this. That never even crossed my mind. Lightning tracking?
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with it. I think it's cool that we have Linux as part of that now. I think that's really awesome, and that of course is being promoted.
You know, it was a close second. There was a great Tizen demo that came out of a conference this week where Land Rover had put a Tizen display in the car, and you had like all these cool hub-like functions and integration with cars and the backup camera, and it was a really impressive demo, but it was pure 100% demo. They weren't even deploying it, but they were trying to create like this Tizen-based platform. Of course, Tizen runs off of Linux for sort of to compete and create an open platform with things like Ford Sync and those other in-car platforms that are Windows CE based.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was really neat. That is linked in the Linux Action Show subreddit over at linuxactionshow.reddit.com if you're a Tizen fan and you want to see that. We've got some more Tizen stories coming up in the news, though, so stick around and wait for those. Right, Matt? I've got 2 desktop picks and a fantastic Android pick for you retro gamers. But first, I want to stop and thank this week's sponsor, GoDaddy.com. GoDaddy.com are longtime supporters of the Linux Action Show for years because they know how awesome you guys are, and they're the exact demo they want to target. And often, you know, you're creating yourself something new, you got a new project, you want to throw something up online, and you want to make it easier for people to find it. Well, get yourself a .com while we've got this great deal, which, by the way, expires at the end of the month. So use this one while you can. Use the code Linux249 when you check out. Linux249 gets you a .com for $2.49. That's
nice.
If you just want to throw
a deal.
You know, that takes it from, yeah, you know, I'd love to throw this up, but I'll just use some freebie DNS because I don't want to pay for it. For $2.49, I just won't get myself one app, and I can pay for that. So go check out GoDaddy.com. Use our code Linux249 to get a .com for $2.49. Use it quick because it's going to expire soon. Or maybe you're getting some hosting. Maybe you want to get yourself an SSL cert. Use our code Go32OFF2. Go32OFF2 has been specially set up by Danica Patrick. Yeah, the race car driver, Danica Patrick. She breaks into the data centers using her stealth technology. It allows her not only to be undetected, but to also pass through walls. It's a subspace thing. And when she gets in there, she integrates in with the computer using some technical implants that she got from the future because her car goes faster than 88 miles per hour. Programs the computer to get us a special deal every time you use the code Go32OFF2. So keep Danica busy when you're over at GoDaddy.com and save yourself 32% off your new order. And thanks to GoDaddy for the longtime sponsorship of the Linux Action Show.
Awesome.
So I'm gonna try to give somewhat of a demo of my app pick, and I think people who've seen some of my game app picks before have gotten the idea that I'm kind of a sucker when you take an old school game that I used to play as a young lad and you put it in the mobile space. Even if the controls aren't perfect, I still got to check it out. I'm an addict for the side scrollers too. So I'm gonna give a pathetic demo here with my overhead camera. It's not going to be very clear, but I'm going to do the best I can. It's called Sonic, Matt. I don't know. Have you heard of this Sonic game before?
I have the Sonic thing. Does it involve a hedgehog?
It turns out it does, and Tails, and a couple other guys. And it is Sonic 1, and it has been reimagined for the Android platform. And here I'm playing it right here. And it's funny because when you start playing, when you load the game up, it seems like a modern Android game, right? And then once you tell it what you want to play, it's almost like it loads a ROM. Like it's even got the 1991 copyright in there. It's very much like the original. It is the original. And I think it's like $1.99 in the Android App Store. Yeah, it's kind of hard.
You know, this might actually convert my wife to Android just by itself. She's a big Sonic fan.
They do have it in iOS too.
Oh, do they?
Oh, yeah. But see, so if you're a Sonic fan, you'll recognize the music. It's a side scroller, and it's got touch controls that are pretty usable. Oh, except for I suck playing it like this. But oh, ouch, ouch, ouch. Well, I didn't do so good, Matt.
I'm digging the music though. Definitely grooving.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So go check it out. We'll have it linked in the show notes. It is Sonic the Hedgehog for Android, and it brings me back. And if you weren't around when this came out, well, that makes me feel old, but you could also go check it out. Once you buy it, Android doesn't display the price, but it came out on the 21st of May, so it's pretty new. And there's several Sonic games now in the store, so I'll link to this one specifically. But it's, gosh.
It sounds like fun.
Well, the intro song to the Linux Action Show and the outro music, Sonic inspired, Sonic the Hedgehog inspired. If you listen closely, there's a little Sonic the Hedgehog in there. Every Linux Action Show, Matt, has a little Sonic the Hedgehog
That's important. And the more you know. The little star going across the screen, right?
All right, let's get our paranoia hats on and talk about my desktop pick. Because I want to be paranoid just for a minute. Maybe I, have super secret plans to take over the world, and I want to keep them encrypted. And I don't need them. I don't need something like an encrypted home directory where I have to decrypt it every time I boot my system and want to just use my computer. Maybe it's something once a week I need to get into, and I want to be able to just encrypt a directory, turn it on, turn it off, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah. So that's where Gnome FS Manager, of course, Encryption FS is a very nice solution for Linux that uses some user space utilities to encrypt things on the fly. And you can actually do specific directories by doing what I assume is probably like some sort of loopback mount. Gnome FS Manager is new. It's available for source for other distros, and it has a PPA for Ubuntu. And because it's so Ubuntu specific, I'm going to throw in a bonus pick today. But I thought I'd give you a little demo first before I show you the bonus pick. So here it is. On the it installs in the system tray, even on Mint. It's no problem.
Oh, slick.
Yep.
Okay.
You bring up the manager, and I just chose a home. So first it asks you when you're setting it up, where do you want to store the encrypted image file? And you, by default, it has a hidden folder in your home directory, and you choose that. And then you say, okay, when I mount this hidden image file, what folder should I mount it to? So I've already set one up where I have /home/chrisf/incfs/crypt is where I will mount to. And then it also shows where it's stashed. And if I just check this mounted box, and I put in my super secret password that's going to be really, really long, a big old passphrase here. You hit mount, and it actually in the background will mount that as a drive. And now I have this crypt folder, which is a totally encrypted file. And you can see I can go here in my home directory. And if I browse down to where I mounted it, incfs, there's the crypt folder, right? And now that is my mounted image file. And you can see I have all the secrets.txt in here where I have the secret to everything stored in a text file.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and now if I go close, if I go unmount it by unchecking the box, it unmounts my encrypted folder. Now if I go back into my home directory and I go into incfs, it's empty because the image file has been unmounted. And if I were able to browse around and go find that image, I would just find some encrypted file that I can't access. So this makes it super easy to just turn on and turn off a directory. Think about maybe a way you could apply this to cloud storage with Dropbox or Ubuntu One, where you could have an encrypted image in your Dropbox that you could just mount and unmount on the fly, and then it would right back to your Dropbox folder and sync out. And then you don't care if Dropbox has the single key to get to your files because inside your Dropbox, you have the data encrypted.
Well, one thing I like about it is I feel like it makes encryption more accessible to newbies.
Oh, totally.
Because a lot of folks are like, I can encrypt my whole home directory, but that's a little frightening. And going to some of the other solutions, while they're incredibly powerful, they're not necessarily the most user-friendly things in the world. This is pretty brain-dead simple.
Yeah, the chat room is asking, Q5Sys in the chat room is saying, how does it compare to something like TrueCrypt? Mm-hmm. TrueCrypt's more of a complete encryption solution that has plausible deniability built into it. Things like that are more advanced. I would say this is more for somebody who really wants to have a safe stash on their computer they just turn on and off real quick. TrueCrypt can totally give you that, and I love TrueCrypt, so I'm not playing that down at all. The nice thing about this is it's really built around integrating in with GNOME. It uses libnotify. It'll use whatever. It'll also just use the standard notification applet. So I really like it, and it's super easy to use. You could in an enterprise, if they have these if you have Linux desktops, it'd be really easy to set this up on like a thumb drive. TrueCrypt would be great too. So maybe make that a bonus pick.
Well, and I think another way of looking at it is saying, well, maybe if this app isn't something you would necessarily want on your machine, I almost promise you that parents, friends, other family members, people that are not necessarily hardcore Linux folks, this is a really great place to get them started and to allow them to protect the directory of their choice.
Totes.
I think it's kind of cool.
Totes. Yep. So you can check it out over at libertyzero.com. We'll have a link in the show notes because it's on our subpage. But GNOME FS is an easy manager to use and monitor for shares featuring per stash configuration, GNOME keyring support, tray menu inspired by Quipkeeper, which is another very good tool. Yeah, there you go. Check
it
out. All right, now a bonus pick, since that one it's not only for Ubuntu, but right now I think the only built packages are for Ubuntu. Mm-hmm. So I want to include something that all of our keyboard-loving friends will appreciate, and that is called DWB. Sounds like the web a little bit.
A little bit.
A WebKit browser that is totally built around the keyboard. Sort of got like Vim-inspired commands, and I'll give you a couple of screenshots here. So you can have a full-screen web experience that's also reminds you of like a tiled window manager. In fact, in one of their screenshots here, they have a really cool side-by. Yeah, here we go. So he's got DuckDuckGo and Bitbucket up on the screen at the same time.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and you navigate. All the links are hotkeyable. Oh, everything is done by the keyboard. It looks really neat. So if you have like if you're already an awesome or any of those sort of minimalist window managers, really, or hell, if you're just doing a remote SSH session and you've got X1114. Seems pretty
Makes
cool.
sense to me. And I love the fact that, I mean, the real takeaway here is that it's keyboard-centric, so that if you not only are a minimalist, but you're a real keyboard fan, you're a big keyboard launcher fellow, that kind of thing. This is a really slick way of going.
Yeah. I think it's pretty neat to watch it, and it's got pretty minimal requirements. It's up on Git, and I'm sure there's some packages, too. It was submitted via the subreddit, so thanks, you guys, for putting that in there. I know there's some people out there who claim to be these crazy, awesome, and ex-nomad users. I don't believe them. But I know they claim to be. I think a few of them claim to be in our chat room right now. Yeah, quotes. The Linux Action Show is live on Sundays over at jblive.tv at 10 a.m. Pacific, and which happens to be, let me look in my notes here, Matt, 10 a.m. Pacific happens to work out to be 1 p.m. Eastern and 6 p.m. UTC, and you can just join us and hang out in our chat room. All right.
Cool.
Now, I've got a whole bunch of links in the show notes this week, but we've got one new link you guys need to know about. We have the last app picks Tumblr page that Majo in our IRC chat room is now keeping up to date for us. So if you want to go look at a list that he'll be updating of all of our previous picks, used to be on our forums, but we're transitioning away from our Jupyter Colony forums, and he's now keeping a rolling Tumblr page, a Tumblr. Is that what? I don't know.
Sounds right.
We'll have Majo's last app picks linked in the show notes, and you can catch all of our previous picks right then and there, Matt. How nice is that? Thanks to Majo for keeping that up to date. All right, Matt, let's do the news.
Hey, it's the news, and this episode is brought to you by
Ting.com. Matt, I have a confession to make.
Uh-oh.
Danica needs to step aside. Angela, I have to warn you about something. Megan Kelly, unfortunately, I have a new love in my life, and it is Ting.com. Ting is mobile that makes sense. They're an MVNO of Sprint. So if you've got good Sprint service in your area, you're going to have great Ting service. Let me tell you about Ting. They're a no BS mobile service, no contracts, no early termination fees. And this one I particularly like, no bundling or ride-along services. Now, if you use one of the two big wireless carriers in the United States, you should be checking your bill because they're adding administrative fees to everyone's bill. And they're not telling you about it. It's just going to show up on your bill. So go check your bill on the next one it comes and make sure that you're not getting screwed over by that mobile provider. And you know what's great about duopolies? When one of these providers does it, guess what? The other provider does it too. So let's change the game a little bit. Let's go check out Ting. So when you get that bill now with its new fees, the administrative charges, take that bill in hand, go over to Ting.com and click on their savings calculator and plug in your information. Not going to take anything that's too private. Just plug in the information and click on the calculate savings and then sit there and honestly tell yourself how you're not going to switch. Take charge. Go over to Ting.com. And the other thing I love about Ting is it's not just fantastic service. They've also got the most modern dashboard out there that makes it very easy to see where your minutes are at, where your data usage is at. I log in and I'm like, oh, I'm doing good. I don't have to worry. And it's another way to kind of keep tabs on how things are going, because one of the things I love about Ting is they credit you on unused service. If you use less than you thought you would, Ting drops you down to the level and hits you with a credit just of the difference on your next bill. And there's no add-on charges for voicemail, caller ID, tethering, or hotspot. Love that. You got three-way calling, call forwarding, and all these other features are just part of the service. No hidden fees. You combine that with their amazing dashboard where I was able to sign up online within a matter of minutes. I mean, that's very compelling. And Matt, they do something else that I don't think we've ever mentioned, which I think is really interesting. If you've got an old device and you are going to get rid of it to move over to a Ting device, they've got a plan that will help you sell your old phone.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah.
So they'll actually provide you a method or a means of getting rid of it. Oh,
they've partnered up with Glide. If you just go over to Ting.com, you can click on their sell your device plan, and right through their website, you put in the information, and they'll actually help you sell your old phone to contribute towards the purchase of a new phone. Get yourself an unlocked phone. Be freed from these contracts. Don't have any hidden fees. Don't be a sucker for 2 years. And you get the savings up front when you own the device yourself. And then you always have a complete and clear understanding of what your relationship is with your provider. They've got some of the best Android devices on the market right now unlocked and ready to rock. Go over to last.ting.com, save $25 off your device. Go look at that savings calculator, see what I'm talking about. I'm paying the lowest monthly rates I've ever had, and I've got free tethering and free hotspotting. I'm absolutely loving Ting.com. Go to last.ting.com, save $25 off a device or your service. And thanks to Ting.com for sponsoring the Linux Action Show.
Love those guys.
Seriously,
love those guys.
Seriously. All right, Matt. Speaking of things that are shaking up the mobile industry, Tizen had a big couple of weeks, actually. They've been having a big couple of weeks with all kinds of announcements coming out, and I wanted to cover a couple of them. Are you ready?
I'm all set. Let's rock it.
All right, so the first one is before we get to Tizen, actually, I'm getting my mobiles all mixed up, Matt.
Yola.
Let's talk about Yola, and then we'll get to Tizen, because they both had big weeks. So Yola announced their first device with a mission. Play a little clip of that.
Hi, I'm Mark Dillon, and it's an honor and a privilege today to bring you something I'm so excited about, the world's first real Yola device running the Sailfish operating system. But to make this really great, we need your help. Show that there is a market for Yola by participating in our pre-order campaign. Yola is about participation and contribution also. So if you're a blogger, please write about us. If you're an application developer, start creating Sailfish applications. If you're into design or fashion, start creating new styles for Yola. But most importantly, Yola is a movement. Join the tribe. Thank you.
So I learned that it's pronounced Yola, thanks to that video. I guess I'm just a big noob. And if you go over to, I think it's just yola.com, Jolla, they've got a very interesting graphic that kind of illustrates how this device works, and they're making this other half aspect of it really big. So the back snaps off.
Oh, wow.
Of this device. So this is the Yola device running Sailfish OS, and there's somewhat of a hardware component to that back. So the idea would be like you could go to a football game and maybe that local team is selling Yola backings, and you snap that onto your phone, and of course it would be printed with maybe their logo on it. And when you snap that onto your phone, it might change your background or your interface to be themed for your sports team.
Okay, back up a second, because that sounds really cool. So you're telling me that by putting on, let's say, a customized themed backing for, like, let's say the Linux Fest, for example, you could snap it onto the back of that phone, and potentially, if they set it up to do this, it will change the background image of the phone, potentially even maybe have something to do with some of the apps or whatever. But at the very least, it's going to kind of theme things.
That's my understanding. I guess there's some sort of interface between the backing and the phone, so that the backing can be hardware components too. It could be like. I think it could be all kinds of things. Like I think it can be different batteries. I think it can be a gamepad. I mean, if I'm understanding correctly, I think it can be everything from a simple NFC chip to a full interface with the phone. I don't actually fully understand how it works, but it's a pretty neat idea. I wonder if it's going to work in terms of touch and feel of the device. You know, if it's going to feel a little plasticky, a little cheap.
Sure.
But kind of a compelling. At least a very different approach than what pretty much everybody else is doing.
Well, I find it refreshing. I mean, usually when somebody comes out with a new, some sort of a new OS or whatever for fun, I usually roll my eyes and think, oh, God, here we go again. But, I mean, the fact that they're doing something compellingly different, even if it isn't like you're not identifying with it personally, the fact that they're at least not rubber stamping everybody, that part's nice. That's what I really appreciate, because maybe there's most of the functionality you don't care about, but hey, maybe you're able to, there's some hardware functionality to where it's able to do something another phone isn't because you snapped into the back. That's awesome. I mean, just they're mixing the pot up a little bit. I really appreciate that.
And they've got kind of an interesting UI. It has sort of a tile look to it in a sense, but the videos I've seen, it looks pretty fluid. Here's the specs of the first Yola phone. It's going to be a GSM phone with LTE support, expected to come soon. It's going to have a capacitive 4.5-inch touchscreen with 16 million colors. It's going to have a micro SD card, support up to 64 gigs with 16 gigabytes of internal storage. It's going to have an 8-megapixel camera with a flash. It's going to do 1080p video. Sailfish OS, dual-core ARM processor. It's going to have assisted GPS support. And it's got this Android compatibility layer.
Interesting.
I guess maybe it's going to be able to run some Android apps. Chat room, do you know more about that?
That would be, see, now we're talking. If they're able to do that, if they're able to do it smoothly and without a lot of hassle, they automatically take care of the ecosystem issue. That way I'm not having to reinvest in all my Android apps. And more importantly, they've got a compelling platform that is definitely different. It sounds interesting. What they really need to do is get some demo models out there on YouTube and actually show this thing off so people can be excited about it. The first video you showed me, it's cool. but I want to see more. I want to see a demonstration. You know?
Chat room says, yeah, it's using Alien Dalvik to do it, which is something I think BlackBerry was originally pioneering or was involved with for the BlackBerry phone. Now, the creators of Yola say, you know what? Our main competition is Android. We're really going up against Android here. And there's also, it looks like, going to be an implementation of the OS that has Qt support. So they're going to kind of be in line with the BlackBerries and the Ubuntu touches out there, where they're also using Qt. So we might see some compatibility across devices. Obviously, it's going to have a huge HTML5 component to it as well. They're kind of trying to strike out and making their own unique ecosystem with a combination of hardware and software. Interesting thing about Tizen is, you know, its roots are in Migo.
Okay.
And when they split off, they kind of eschewed the Qt aspect of it and said, no, we're not right now. And that kind of turned off a lot of developers, is my understanding. And now it's interesting to hear them say, yeah, we're looking at Qt5. Yeah, we're thinking we're going to go Qt5.
Well, and someone in the chat room pointed something out interesting. So the tools that allow the phone to run Android apps on it, apparently, according to them, it actually will run it 20 to 30% faster than Android. Again, I haven't verified this, but this is just a claim.
No.
If that's the case, if big quotes there, if that's the case,
that's funny.
Boom. That's boom. I mean, that's like
funny is
okay,
what that is.
You know, again, I would need to actually research that before I can claim that as gospel. But it sounds
possible.
Really, yeah, it sounds exciting.
If that's true, then what is Android just a huge pig?
Yeah,
I guess, yeah. Anyways, here they said this is not about us against new emerging platforms. Speaking towards some of the other new upstarts that are out there, like Firefox OS. He says this is about new platforms as a whole against Android. I think that's the game.
Yes. I would say that's really what they need to go after. iOS, who cares? But I think Android's really where it's at.
Yeah, it does almost seem like, an iOS user is, if, they're an iOS user, but if you could catch a few Android users, I mean, maybe they're more likely to switch. I don't know.
That's true.
All right. So now let's talk about Tizen. Tizen had a big week. So on May 23rd, the second day of a 3-day Tizen Developers Conference in San Francisco. This is last week. There was confirmation about a rumored smartphone running Tizen that came out called the GTI 85605 or something like that. Rolls right off the tongue. And it looks like it could be coming from Samsung. And here's what I find really fascinating about this, man. Samsung's going to be rocking a phone running Tizen 2.1. And they're taking their TouchWiz UI from Android and throwing it on top of Tizen and almost making the underlying OS a little more irrelevant and just saying it's really all about our applications on top of the operating system. Thanks, but no thanks, Android. We've got a new platform to sit on top of.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, some photos have leaked out, and it I don't know, it could be pretty nice. It's going to have the Touch UI 5.0, which includes S-Voice, their Siri competitor, Wi-Fi Direct, and a lot of the other stuff that's on Android. It's going to be a mid-range Samsung device, and I don't know. I think it's
piques my interest. I would love to get my hands on some of these, and really see what they feel like and kind of check them out.
Now, Intel showed off something that might make you a little nervous. They demoed a laptop running GNOME 3 Shell with Tizen, and I believe, Matt, there was no X11 involved at all. Dun dun dun.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Oh no!
Yeah, but so you got Tizen on laptops, you got Tizen on Samsung phones, you got Tizen in Jaguars. It was a big week for Tizen. Wow. All of these alternative mobile operating systems are starting to get a little more serious. They've gone from concept to we're starting to see execution now. Kind of an exciting time.
I wonder what the pivotal point was. I wonder if they saw the reception of, say, the Firefox OS or Ubuntu or some of these others and said, hey, look, people are really interested in an alternative. Let's get excited about this. Let's really dump some development hours into it. Wonder what that point was to where that really started to take off with them.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm straining to be interested still. Really, really, at this point, I just don't find them compelling. I don't really find the chances of widespread success to be very high, at least not in developed nations. So overall, I would say I'm not very excited about any of these yet. I love the idea of having something like the Yola device where it's a little more customizable. Maybe, that's getting more closer to an enthusiast type device, I think.
Right.
But, I mean, at the end of the day, I want all the cool apps. I want full carrier support. I want the greatest, latest devices that come out all the time. I don't think I'm the target for this type of device.
Probably not, but I think that, putting this device aside and going back a new story, I mean, just in general, whatever new mobile OS is able to solve the ecosystem problem, as one person in the chat room pointed out earlier, even if it runs Android apps, it needs to do so in a fluid manner that actually works with the user interface and doesn't, create new problems. It needs to be fluid. If there's a way to solve those problems and to bring that ecosystem into these new operating systems, I think that's going to be the point where people will actually start taking it seriously. Those operating systems that are not running Android apps, are not being able to bring your ecosystem into that experience, I don't think are going to do as well, except for maybe some people that don't use smartphones already, maybe.
I'll tell you, as far as the alternative platforms go, Tizen is looking like it has Tizen and Yola both look very good. Tizen has the advantage of some big backers. They're backed by Samsung. They're backed. Intel's got an interest in them. They've got a community established, so and now they got Gnome 3 Shell running on it. So I don't know. I think in a year from now we'll be having a much different conversation. We're still at the point where it's early days.
That's true. That's very true.
KDE. Let's talk about KDE. About to have a big change up in due time. They're doing something they did at the end of the KDE 3 series. You remember, Matt, when KDE 4 launched, tons of people stayed on KDE 3X because it was stable, right? It had been polished and it was good.
4 needed a little time in the oven.
Yeah, and I remember it was a very common topic on our chat room. Like, should I switch to KDE 4 yet, or should I stick on KDE 3? People were talking about it all the time. And one of the reasons I think they were so successful in that is they really kind of refined that last iteration of KDE 3 before they moved on to KDE 4. Right? They really okay, we really got to make this last one good because this is where people are going to hang for a while. Well,
I agree.
It's happening all over again. Aaron Saigo and the KDE project have announced plans to make KDE 4.1 of the Plasma workspace, KDE 4.1, will be a long-term support release. Saigo says the developers are close to a feature freeze for the next version of KDE's desktop shell, that once Plasma Workspaces 4.11 is released, there will be no more feature developments in this branch. As part of the stabilization process, the developers will provide bug fixes and translation updates for 2 years after the 4.11 release. Once the release is finished, the developers will switch their development effort to Plasma Workspaces 2, which will be based on Qt 5 and KDE Framework 5. So there we go. That is the announcement that once KDE 4.11's out the door, the work on KDE 5 begins.
That's exciting. It's both exciting and bittersweet, and also a little frightening. It's kind of, a change is scary. So it's kind of hard to to move on to that next step, but it's going to be exciting to see how they develop.
Yep. So they're going to be breaking out the KDE project into subcomponents and things will be on their own timelines instead of one cohesive big release at once to sort of meet the needs of the individual projects. We'll follow it as it goes, and we'll take a look at KDE 4.11 when it hits. And Aaron's very, 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 very long blog post is in the show notes. Look how long that blog post is.
Good grief. Holy moly.
Yeah. It's a lot of words.
That is.
All right, let's talk about Unity 8 and something kind of interesting. Phronix covered this one. Mir made a lot of progress this week. Canonical's Kevin Gahn shared a status update for advancements made by their team this week on the Mir display server and the next generation Unity 8 interface. Some key takeaways from the update are Unity began running on Mir now. Window management functionality has been broken out into a separate layer from the Unity 8 shell. The Window Manager will now become its own new project. Multi-client testing under Mir has begun. Some issues have been discovered. Some Mir composition code was refactored and will ultimately work on delivering support for bypassive composition. A Qt-based light DM mockup has been written. Wow, they're rewriting and redoing so much stuff. And next week, this coming week is going to be all work on Unity 8 and Mir management. So,
well, at this rate, I mean, let's face it. At this rate, the monkey suit's inevitable because yes, I'm sure they'll get it to a point where they're able to get it into Ubuntu, and that's wonderful. I mean, get all these things rolled into their own operating system. That's awesome. But that's not going to get this onto, say, OpenSUSE or Fedora or pretty much or Debian or any of the other distributions. I mean, that really leaves me hanging. So even if it meets the Ubuntu piece, it's going to be the monkey suit action show, as one person pointed out. That's really what it is.
Maybe so. Maybe
I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah. While we're talking about Unity and while we're talking about Mir, I think maybe the best way to follow up on that story would be a Q&A that Mark Shuttleworth participated in.
Mm-hmm.
And he talked a little bit about Unity 8 and Mir off the top. He said, this was the question. Is it wise to use Unity 8 for the first time on a long-term support release? Mark responded with, the current plan is to stretch for Unity 8 in 14.04, but we're confident we'll have Unity 7 running there just fine. We already support Unity 7. It's getting faster and cleaner as we go. But then the follow-up question was, but I heard that Unity 8 is just a Qt front end for GNOME. How is Unity 8 supposed to function? He said, with the work that's going on into phone and mobile, we're rapidly building a great community around a new portfolio of apps.
Mm-hmm.
We'd like to attract new developers from a wide range of backgrounds, including GNOME and KDE. He says, we've built on foundations to support what we're seeing, to support and see amazing commitments from game companies and other development shops. And they said, well, speaking of development shops, what are the intentions from AMD and NVIDIA?
That's a good question, actually.
Are they going to support Mir, right? Because this is the question. Is like, okay, so congratulations, Canonical. Ubuntu is now the favored platform by Valve. People are adopting it.
Right.
3D acceleration has never been more important on the Linux desktop than it is in 2013. This is the absolute peak of dependency on 3D acceleration. Mark's response to this critical question is as follows. It's too soon to tell if they'll support it, but history suggests that open source communities are prone to hysterics up front and pragmatism in the long run. So the hysterics were unsurprising, and the pragmatic result will equally be unsurprising. The decision to make Mir was solid. Wayland did not meet our needs or yours. We chose to invest in something, and we chose to do it in a very quality-driven way. I find it bizarre to be criticized for writing open source software and writing it with quality and performance in mind from the start. Much of the mudslinging and flinging was unjustified, but that's just the hysterics part, which will happen again, I'm sure. Mir is fantastic, clean and crisp. That was his answer.
That was the most and Mark, if you're watching this, no offense, but honestly, that was the most non-answer answer I've ever heard in my entire life. I mean, the points he brought up in a different context are valid from his perspective, but that didn't even remotely answer the question. Not even a little bit. Not even kind of.
Yeah, they don't have an answer.
No, and that's fair, but don't blow sunshine at my backside telling me that, you know, come on. I mean,
right.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Well, it's already been pulled off the web, Matt. Maybe he got too much heat. But our last story this week, Linus Torvalds, one of the top 14 most vulgar user, or not vulgar, you know, swears the most on GitHub. At the top 14%, the blog post that is not working right now had like this chart breakout of like Linus swearing and all this great data around Linus's swearing.
Right,
well, hopefully the site will be back up so you guys can go read that yourself after the show. But we've talked a lot about Linus's antics and his swearing on the show. I just think it's his motivation technique. It's his motivation technique. But he actually made, and it doesn't surprise me. I mean, Linux has got to be one of the largest, if not the largest project on GitHub. And Linus is pretty involved with that Linux project.
Yes.
So
yes.
There you go.
And here's another takeaway that just occurred to me.
Yeah.
Take that same question that we asked Mark and then asked Linus. It would be a one-line sentence with 3 or 4 places of the F word. and I would probably get more takeaway from that than I would from Mark's answer. I'm just saying.
No kidding, actually.
Go Linus.
Good point. I want to know who is more vulgar than Linus? And what kind of jerk is that? And what do they do that's so important that they get to be a jerk like that?
True. Oh, maybe, I don't know, maybe Balmer. I've heard he yells a lot.
I don't think he's on GitHub, though. I'm pretty sure
no, he's not on GitHub,
no.
but he definitely screams a lot. So
since that last link didn't load, one bonus story. Wayland Preview now running on the Raspberry Pi, and here they have the Chromium web browser, it looks like in the background, and LibreOffice running on the Pi with Wayland. No X11 code. They're using some X11 emulation to run these apps, but there's no actual Xorg code in there, I believe.
Oh, boy.
Wayland running on the Pi with LibreOffice and Chromium.
You know, Wayland plus Pi equals monkey suit. I mean, I think that's really my takeaway on that. It's, boy.
You are hosed. Yeah. This was, we got so many people emailed this one in this week. I was going to cover it in the feedback segment, but then I thought, since we kind of got taken, kind of had a fail link there. Here, they got a little video. Let's play the video.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, let's rock that.
Oh, it's just cool music showing the visuals. So here's one of the developers working on it as a desktop. It's pretty cool. Yeah, you're hosed, Matt.
I'm screwed.
Yeah,
well, especially as dedicated and as like he even has proper posture and everything. I don't stand a chance.
No.
The man's he's on a mission.
So here it is using Xorg and X11. So I don't know what this video is, but they also this week had the official Fedora spin for the Raspberry Pi has been released. Wow. So if you want to run Fedora on your Raspberry Pi, now they've got there's a spin you can go get. All right, Matt. Well, there you go. Yes. So we'll have links to all that stuff in the show notes, as well as that line of story that didn't work for us this time, but it might work after the show. And go to jupiterbroadcasting.com, look for the Linux Action Show Season 27, Episode 2. Scroll down past the video and stuff, and you'll find links to everything we just talked about so you can read about it more. But with the news all done, let's go review Mint 15. It's time the Linux Action Show takes a look at Mint 15, which should be releasing this week. But before we jump into that, I want to say thank you to our segment sponsor, System76, creators of the finest machines in the world, born to run Linux. And they have a whole range of laptops, starting well below $1,000, up to my big boy, the Bonobo right here, the Bonobo Extreme. And I love this laptop. I kind of wish I could take it to bed and cuddle, but I can't.
You could, but it might be a little awkward.
The problem is the wife, Matt.
Yeah, I just don't think she's going to be down with that.
No, she doesn't like it. She says it comes between us. Literally. I don't know what that's about. But that's how much I love my Bonobo. If you're looking for a system that you want to run Linux on and really want to have a hassle-free experience through all of your upgrades, through everything from plugging in something to the sound card to using your webcam, everything. You want it to just work as you expect it. Go check out System76.com. They've got great desktops, great laptops. They are the best machines out there for Linux. And tell them the Linux Action Show sent you. We love it. We love it. And then send us some pics.
Totally. We love it when you guys send us pics because then we can share it with the audience.
You can go troll our subreddit. There was a thread going this week about System76, and a lot of owners jumped in the thread and said, hey, I got a System76, and I absolutely love it. The guys aren't kidding. It really is the best computers to run Linux. Do it right. Go over to System76.com.
That's right.
Thanks to those guys. Okay. So Mint 15 is in RC right now, and it's supposed to land this week, probably a day or two after this episode comes out. And so you and I thought we should talk about it. But I wanted to make a couple of disclaimers at the top of the review that might just disqualify it for some people right off the bat. Because I think, it's important to mention some of these things. First of all, depending on when Mint actually does come out, it's going to have Mint 15 will have roughly an 8-month support window because they're tied to 13.04 of Ubuntu. Right? And Canonical has announced that Ubuntu releases that are non-long-term support will have shorter support windows. And here's the double whammy of that. Mint 15 is not going to offer you an upgrade process to Mint 16. So at the end of that 8 or 9 months, you're not going to be able to just upgrade to Mint 16. Just like if you're on Mint 14 now, you're not upgrading to 15. Some people, that's a problem. Some people are more nuke and pavers like myself, and that's not an issue.
Later on in the segment, I actually have a workaround for that. But we'll get to that.
Oh, okay, good. And the other thing is, I want to tackle a myth that comes up every time we talk about a Mint on the show. There's sort of like this mindset that, well, I'm not going to use it because it's derivative. It's based on Ubuntu, which is based on Debian, and I'm just not going to. That's not pure. I'm not. Why would I be bothered with an Ubuntu reskin? That's still opinion that sort of permeates out in the community. And I think it's important when you're thinking about that to think of just the whole history of open source. Look at everything that everything we use today stands on the shoulders of giants. Really, I mean, there's nothing in open source we don't use that isn't built on top of some other amazing technology at some point. I got a little image here in the show notes that just kind of drives this home of the Linux timeline, the family tree there, the Linux distro timeline, and it's this epic time branch of all the different distributions and what they've branched off of. And Debian is like the proto distro of so many different things. But
it really is, yeah.
When you look at this actual history of Linux, Mint's just doing what all great distributions do. They're really,
Well, and I want to point something out on that. A lot of people think that it's basically a skinned Ubuntu, and that's still a common, as you pointed out, that's a common thought. But factually, at this point, if you've actually run Cinnamon on other, just on Ubuntu itself, there are big differences there, not just in tools, but underneath the hood. There are a number of tweaks that are very specific that their developers did. Go way beyond the desktop.
And now they're doing a lot of things. Like they've taken GDM, the old GNOME login manager, and they're sort of making that their own, MDM. Right. They've taken Nautilus, they've forked it, and they've named it Nemo. They're building a lot of tools around package management. I think maybe that's a good place to start. Okay?
Excellent place.
So right here, I have the Cinnamon Desktop Edition. You and I both kicked around Mate and Cinnamon, and I thought this tool is available on both, and this is the one I want to start with because it's a big differentiator between standard Ubuntu. And I think if you are someone who maybe is a little disenfranchised with Ubuntu, you're not totally secure in where they're going, and you want something that's maybe a little more traditional, but you still love the Ubuntu base for software compatibility, because I'll be honest, I'm all about, when I see a new app, they've always got a PPA, and I love just grabbing that PPA and having the application available to me. Honestly, I don't know how people who browse the web and use Linux and want to install applications don't struggle with that if they're not using an Ubuntu base, because everything's got a PPA, and it's just boom, boom, and they're added. And with every other distribution, to me, it's like, well, it's got to be in the repo, it's got to be in the build service, it's got to be in a special repository maintained by the community, whereas PPAs enable the developer themselves to like, boom, here's a repo, go grab it. And I love that about somebody who's always trying out applications. So for me, Ubuntu compatibility in some ways is almost a requirement for what I do.
I would agree. And that's definitely a great point, because as you pointed out, like the build service, you actually have to wait for that to be uploaded.
Look at this here. So people in chat, the Arch repository has way more applications than Ubuntu. I don't know if you browse the same web I do, but every single Linux app I go to download has a PPA, and it's very hit and miss if they're in the Arch repo, if at all, or if it's a maintained version. For big stuff, for like all like the main open source projects, absolutely. Arch probably even has Ubuntu Beat. But for like things like the GNOME Encryption Manager that we just demoed this morning, or just about every other app that I ever demo that maybe is brand new or still being created, they're not in anybody's repo, but they've got PPAs. I don't know what web you guys are looking at, but the web I see has much more software available for Ubuntu than any other Linux distribution out there. But the problem is, I think sometimes Ubuntu's smoking the crack pipe.
Well, one thing I wonder, here an example, what is it, Arrow FS, I believe, that we use, is that available in Arch? I don't even know.
I don't know.
Yeah, so that would be an example, because I doubt that it is. I know that, and I mean, even on OpenSUSE, I had to actually go with a completely different route because they don't have a
I can't even believe our chat room right now. It's so easy to put stuff in there. It's like, what world are you guys living in? Like, this is the problem with Arch users, is they just think that everybody's going to come along and build a distribution from scratch and then spend 15 minutes when they find some sort of source file out on the web to add it to the Arch repository. It is self-delusional to think this is how people operate. People do not do stuff that is... Okay, I shouldn't say that. A lot of you guys do, because you're awesome and you have a huge background in Linux and this is what you love doing. But the masses that are coming to Linux these days to play Valve games and stuff like that, you guys, you completely lose them when you mention Arch. Like, they have no idea what you're even talking about. So you got to understand, this is a huge issue in the Linux world, is these applications make it super easy to deploy on Ubuntu.
And I think that's really the underlying point that you pointed out, is Arch is awesome, but I think Arch is something that you would graduate to. It's a lot like taking a kid right out of middle school and dropping him into university. It's not going to work.
Right.
They need to actually have an opportunity to grow and become accustomed to a Linux distribution, become really familiar with the applications involved on it, and then when they're ready, then they can graduate to Arch, because Arch is something, that is very specific to individuals.
Here's the chat room is so convinced of this. I'll put a little challenge to them. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Go take that GNOME Encryption Manager software that I demoed. Here, I'll even see if I can put the link in the chat room for you guys.
Okay.
Go grab that software. By the end of this show, have it installed on Arch and give me a screenshot. And if you can do that and you can replicate the steps in a few easy steps, you know what? Then I'll believe you. But in the meantime, to me, let's see, where is it? I don't think I can paste it out of my note. I don't think so. In the meantime, to me, this is a huge issue. And I guess, I try to conceptualize something that is not in the Arch repositories, that you can't use Pacman for. If you are a new user, this is a huge problem. And I guess if you don't subscribe to that, I'm not going to convince you. Let's move on. Let's move on, because Mint is attempting to address this issue. They're taking advantage of the fact that they have compatibility with Ubuntu, but they're adding a front end that makes managing PPAs very easy. Like on Ubuntu, you have to load PPA Manager and things like that. But if you go in here, you can see I've just added these PPAs right here. And if I want to add a new one, I can go in here and I just paste that repo, right? Oh, of course, I went and copied the URL. I'll go get my...
Get rid of that.
Where was... Oh, yeah. So I'm going to try adding this... I don't know if they actually have it available for Ubuntu 13.04, so I might fall on my face here, but I'm going to give it a shot. So I'm going to go grab this apt-fast PPA repo, and I paste it into here, and I hit OK. And if it's a legit repo, it'll take it. Yep, OK, looks legit, actually. Yeah, and then I just hit Update Cache, and it goes out and updates the package management, and done. I've added the PPA. It's very easy for users to understand, and the UI is actually looking really nice. I'm kind of shocked that Ubuntu doesn't have this, to be honest. Because this is, I mean, in the week that I have used this, you can see I've added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 PPAs. So this is something I do pretty frequently. And I love the fact that they've got everything built into one user interface. I think for an Ubuntu-like experience, for those folks like us that would prefer to go that direction, this is really how it should be done versus the way Ubuntu proper is doing it. Because I think Ubuntu proper is taking much more of a scatterbrained approach. To where I think Mint definitely nailed it on this. The other thing they've done inside the same tool, what I think both you and I like a lot because we were kind of playing with it before the show, is you get to pick your mirrors, and in the screen where you pick your mirrors, it'll start doing performance benchmarking and give you a little bar rating of the performance from that mirror. Other package managers do this, but Ubuntu doesn't do this. And so this is nice. There's tools you can get. Again, there's third-party things you can do on Ubuntu to pull this off, but Mint is integrated in as part of the Mint tools. Right. And it's nice. It's simple. I can see right here, okay, this liquidweb.com is my best mirror to use, which is actually different than the one I had picked. And now I can hit apply. And between the two, now I have the fastest mirror. I've added apt-fast. Let's try doing, what was, I added mate core. What was it, mate common? Was that the other one? I think so, yeah. I don't know if you have to update your cache first or not. Install mate-common. Let's try that. Yeah. Oh, my apt-fast didn't work. Yeah. apt-fast. I didn't install it. That's why. So let's try installing that first. That'll work. apt-get install. Have you tried apt-fast before? No, I haven't. But it's now that I've got something that's going to work with apt, I think I'm going to actually give that a whirl. Yeah. So apt-fast is sweet because it'll pull down multiple files at once. So instead of whereas apt will just be like I grab this package, then I grab this package, then I grab this package. Apt-fast will do multi-threaded downloads. So I just told it to do 5 threads at once. So it'll download 5 packages at once, which is nice. So it gets you a nice fast. So now I do apt-fast install mate-common because I want to demonstrate the mate desktop too. And I think that's important because there's such significant differences. Yeah. All right, let's take a look while that downloads in the background. I'll give one last thing before we wrap up on the software sources. Is in here also you can manage all the different keys you have, but you also get this maintenance where you can purge and do fixes and things like that. So I think that's really actually pretty. I think that's a really nice, useful software package and management tool. I think it's very handy, and it's nice that it provides it all in a unified experience. And speaking of unified experience, you gotta love the control panel. The control panel is pretty slick. And HW Killer in the chat room has completed. He has gotten it set up on Arch, proving once again that because the hardcorest of the hardcores can do it, every user is going to be able to do it. Right. Here is now here's my Mint theme. What's really cool about Mint is they've made all of the themes, just like in KDE, downloadable via their new appearance panel that's been recently updated. So you go into your themes, they have the Get More Online tab, and then you just select the ones based on the rating. You check the box. You hit install, it goes out, pulls it off of the Mint site, loads it on there, and look, boom, installed. I can switch themes, hit apply theme, and now I'm using the new Mint theme that I just downloaded. And it does that with extensions too, or the little applets, and I mean pretty much any feature on Cinnamon that can actually be tweaked or whatnot. I really like that. And they're desklets, which is pretty limited. Yeah. They have pretty limited set of desklets at this point, 3 or 4 really, but it's an interesting idea. It's an interesting idea. And, of course, the beauty of Cinnamon is that you can pretty much run it on any distribution. Mm-hmm. You're not limited to Mint. So if you want to try it on, whatever your distro is, you can certainly do so. But I think Cinnamon is definitely one of those things that make Mint stand out for me specifically is that, it's already provided for you. It's ready to go. And for newbies, it's great, Oh, hey, one thing I was going to mention. Did you have any luck getting your proprietary drivers to work? I don't think I even ever bothered.
Yeah, it did not detect. That was one failure I found.
What card? What kind of card?
When it was an HEI, I forget the exact. It's a reasonably new.
Yeah,
well,
I saw that in the Mint forums. I saw issues about that in the Mint forums with the HEI.
Yeah, it was real disappointing. It was kind of like, I mean, it's not a big deal. Again,
it's still RC.
Yeah, it's still RC, and it's something that if I really want, I can go and do it. It's just, again, I'm looking at Ma and Pa Kettle, be able to park them in front of this and have them do it. So
one thing I thought was a little odd in the system settings is they have this advanced and normal mode, and in normal mode, your screen resolution display settings doesn't show up. So like it took me a little while to define my display settings, and I realized, I have to switch to advanced mode, and then it shows up.
But that's good, because imagine if you have an unusual monitor, for whatever reason, something's a little wonky, and you're, like, let's say parents go into their display settings and they get their resolution all cockeyed and they can't get it figured, and you can't then, because the resolution's all screwed up, you can't reach buttons. I've had this happen before. By having that hidden in normal mode, that might actually be a good thing.
Maybe so. This Cinnamon release is very compelling. It's actually quite fast. I still find sometimes slight delays when I tap the key and the menu comes up, but overall, it's pretty good. And Nemo's looking amazing. Look how, this is a visual thing, but this feels like a power file manager that still looks really slick. I like that they let me toggle on my location thing, but they also still do the breadcrumb thing if you want it. The theme looks very good. The performance can't complain. It's got your free file system space listed here in the left-hand panel. Browses the network just great. Mint feels like the old desktop metaphor that when I use it, I realize we kind of landed on this menu bar and menu-based system after, an iteration of 25, 30 years of desktop design. And to just throw this away is a little silly, because I think sometimes when new blood comes into the industry, they sometimes forget what the previous generation had to figure out and discover and sort of got to, and then they kind of come in, and it's good in some ways because they come in with a new perspective, and we have new interfaces and new ways of doing things, and I think a lot of the desktop projects are going that way. Cinnamon feels like if you were to never hit the reset button that the Linux desktop hit a couple of years ago, if you never hit that button and you just kept building the best traditional desktop you ever saw, Cinnamon feels like it's going that direction. It's got a couple of hiccups still, but it feels like it's that standing on the shoulder of giants. Like it's what we would have gotten to as a mainline desktop if we had kept going in this direction.
I would agree with that. I would definitely agree with that. I also agree. I would also point out that I think that their little enhancements, for instance, their update manager, that's one of my favorites. The fact that it rates the how important a package is, or how quote unquote likely it is to change something from a negative.
Right.
Like it'll mark, from 1 to 5. It actually will rate things in that fashion, and I find that important because. For people that, like, let's say, again, I hate to use my parents as an example, but it's kind of, but it's nice to do. I said I would set them up to where updates that are rated at 5 are not showing up automatically to be updated by themselves unless I'm there to handle it. Because if something goes wrong, I can fix it. Versus them calling me later on an Ubuntu desktop saying, "Oh, hey, I updated the kernel and now my webcam doesn't work, or now this is broken," or whatever it may be. I like that kind of control. I like the fact that you can kind of pick and choose a little easier. So the update manager is awesome. I really love that.
It solves this problem that I have with my mom. She calls me up and she says, "Well, my Mac's got 17 updates because I've never updated it in my life." Right. And I'm not, and it's everything from like a firmware update for EFI to, a new version of iTunes. And she doesn't know, like, what's a security fix. She sees there's a Java update on there, but she doesn't know if that Java update is any more important than that iTunes update. There's no system in place to tell her, "Mom, you have to install these number 5s, and these number 2s you can completely ignore." There's nothing like that on really any other desktop. And it is such a small thing to just, and it's color-coded too, right? And that's what I like too, is the numbers are color-coded. So this number is a bad number because it's red, and you need to install the red update. Gosh, it seems like a simple thing, but
it really does. And I know that I've heard the argument against it in saying, well, some of these updates that are marked 5 are in fact important critical updates, and I agree with that. I do, but I like the fact that it allows someone with more experience to come in and handle it versus someone that really has no business updating it. And I know that it may come as a shocker to a lot of you guys, but those of you that have parents and those of you that have family and friends that are not power users, that kind of matters. Really different desktops for different folks, and those are not people that you really want to receive a call from the next day after they host their system. And as you pointed out on OS 10, firmware updates and stuff like that. The fact that it's intermixed with like an iTunes update, that's scary, because what if there was a bug with that update and your parents didn't know?
All right, and when she's got like five or 10 updates, and one of them is a firmware update, I always like, oh yeah, update all these things, reboot and update your firmware. And that doesn't sound very safe either. And it's I don't know. All right, Cinnamon. Cinnamon's going to be interesting to see where it goes. Their mates, both Mate and Cinnamon, are kind of becoming an island to the Mint project on their own. CinnaArch is moved away and gone to GNOME Shell because Cinnamon is dependent on, I think, GNOME 3.6 libraries, and people want to move on to GNOME 3.8. So Cinnamon's kind of falling behind in that regard. You can't run Cinnamon and GNOME 3.8 on the same system. That's kind of a bummer. But you can run Mate and Cinnamon on the same system, and Mate is the alternative version of Cinnamon. Of Mint. They're really trying to differentiate themselves. They have a Mate desktop and a Cinnamon desktop. Those are their two desktops. They don't have KDE. They don't have GNOME 3.8. They don't have Unity. It is just Cinnamon and Mate. And Mate is GNOME 2.
Well, and I think that's the big differentiator, is that it's, or some people will call it Mate or Matey.
Yeah, I suppose,
I call it Mate just like I do with GNOME.
I do because I'm a dope and I don't know any better.
Well, that's just what I call it. But one of the interesting takeaways is that Mate is not only GNOME 2, but you would, a GNOME 2 in feel. But one thing I found was really fascinating, and this was what really surprised me. I actually went and compared the resource usage between Cinnamon and Mate or Matey, and I was surprised to find that there was really not a lot of difference there. I was blown away at the fact that there was no real performance increase or benefit to running Matey.
I would attribute that actually to Cinnamon being tight for the most part.
Yeah, because it didn't used to be that way. Cinnamon used to be a dog. Yeah. It used to be like old school Unity. It was horrible.
Now, I installed the Cinnamon version of Mint and then installed Mate separately, and what I got is actually a lot different than if you install from the Mate ISO. I got a full-on 2-panel, 100% traditional GNOME 2 desktop with the System, Places, and Applications menu, everything you got back in the bad old days of GNOME 2. Oh, totally.
And you can even do applets. I was right-clicking on the panel.
All the good old applets.
It's great.
But they also have that MD, what do they call their Mate menu? That's that one complete. That menu is still, in my opinion, the best launcher menu of them all, because in the search box, it's like freaking magic. You can type Chromium, and if you don't have Chromium installed, it'll say, would you like to install it from the repo? And right there in the menu, it'll either launch the application, and if the application is not installed, then it'll replace that with, would you like to install it? That's magic. When you're sitting there like, I want to launch Chromium, and you forget you haven't installed it for the first time, you type it in, it says, would you like to? Yes, and you have it. Man, that is a satisfying feeling. And I'll tell you what, it might be around roughly the same resource usage of Cinnamon like you were noticing, but holy crap, Mate is so fast.
It is very responsive.
It's like back in the day when Windows 98 was out, and you could still install Windows 3.11 on those computers.
Exactly.
And then Windows 3.11 would be so unbelievably fast that it would almost feel like the windows were opening before you clicked them. That's what Mate feels like. And it is so amazingly fast that I got to tell you, man, I sat here for a second and gone, I think I got to switch. I think I got to switch.
I differ on that. I liked the responsiveness of it. It reminded me a lot of the OpenSUSE with KDE, actually, but
I'd say it's faster than that, in my opinion.
Oh, it was, it is faster. But it had it felt that kind of responsiveness. But I got to tell you, as far as actually running different applications and all that, as long as you're staying away from like Chrome, because I actually found that Chrome is just becoming a dog, and Firefox is actually performing a lot better lately. Really, it was kind of a wash, and honestly, I kind of like the way Cinnamon's doing stuff. It's attractive. It's sexy. I love the tweaking you can do with it. And I themed it in really great themes. It was just exciting to use. I really enjoyed that.
I agree. It feels much more modern. Yeah. It feels like the future a little bit.
It's the future.
Yeah. I'm going to switch back to Cinnamon, actually. Yeah, pulling down the themes and all that kind of stuff. I think overall, here's my final conclusion. There's still a couple of hang-ups for Mint. It's got a couple of, they have, well, I'll link to their GitHub page, their roadmap in the show notes. They have, I'm pulling it up right now, I think they have like 4 outstanding bugs still before they hit final.
Okay. And
one
of
has
course,
to do
the
with
driver thing was one of them, I think. So.
Yep. One has to do with like the W32 codecs for Windows Media, and one has to do with EFI. So if you're an EFI user, you might want to avoid it for now. But
yeah, those are pretty big bugs, actually.
Yeah. And also, if the 8-month support cycle bothers you, if that's going to be a problem for you, you might want to consider skipping this release and wait for the long-term support edition to come out, or check out they have a Debian rolling release, which is pretty compelling. But if those things don't bother you, if the 8-month support cycle and the non-upgrade path don't bother you, and I've seen a lot of comments this weekend on the web about people who are switching from Ubuntu just as a wait and see to see where they go. But they want the application support. I tell you, next time I reload my Bonobo, I will very seriously consider switching to Mint. In the short period of time, about a week, that I used Mint, I had zero compatibility issues loading any of the software. I didn't load many Steam games, but I loaded Steam. I loaded a lot of the things that I use in my everyday practice with zero issue. And now that I'm not as much of an Ubuntu Software Center user, now that Steam is out and things like that, not having the Ubuntu Software Center is not a loss for me. So if you're kind of in my boat, I recommend Mint 15 with Cinnamon. Here's what I want to recommend, Matt. I want to get your take on this because I know you're an XFCE user.
Yes.
Would you recommend using Mate over XFCE? Because I think that's where the big competition is between those two.
I would say that it depends. If you're someone that would rather customize your desktop more, XFCE makes more sense. But really? I think Mate, if you want something out of the box, it's a little more doable. I think Mate's simpler to use.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they're both again different audiences, different strokes, different folks. But I think for myself, XFCE makes more sense. But I think for someone else in my family, I probably, if I was looking for an experience like that, I'd probably aim them at Mate.
That would be it. There you go. You just nailed it. If I'm loading this for somebody who has a low resources machine, they're more familiar with a Windows interface, something like that, I think I'd go Mate. If for me, I think because XFCE has a wider adoption base at this point, I'm probably more likely to say there's more quote unquote wood behind that arrow. So I might go that route myself personally if I'm an enthusiast and I want that kind of desktop. But Mate's compelling. If nothing else, this release of Mate impressed me way more than the previous release of Mate. People who've watched the show for a while might recall that in the past I've not recommended Mate. I've said it's not ready. It's kind of a snoozer. It's too old. This release was something like they had 1,000 fixes that applied to this new Mate, and the performance is outstanding. They've polished the UI. They've polished that theme. That menu is better than ever. I would love to take that menu and put that menu in Cinnamon. I think it's a faster, better menu than the one that's in Cinnamon. I
agree.
I think it's amazing. So I think both of these are a must-try, and then you got to make your own call. Run them in VirtualBox or the new Proxmox, something like that, and see what you think.
I think you nailed it. As far as those folks that are concerned about that 8-month release setup and all that sort of thing, the easy way to do that, there's really, really simple. Dedicated home, of course, makes life easier no matter how you roll it. And of course, Mint backup. Just back up your apps because it does something. Again, Ubuntu doesn't do that. Back up your not without Software Center anyway. Back up your applications and then back up your home directory and then just install. You're done. Who cares? It's not that big a deal. Yeah, that's the great thing about Linux. It's really not that big a deal.
And I want to put the call out. I'm curious. I've seen some issues with Cinnamon and Mate on multi-monitor setups. I didn't get a chance to test that. I've done mirroring with no issue, but that's just mirroring. So if you've gotten a chance to try that under Mint 15, leave a comment maybe in the feedback thread in the subreddit. Let me know how that's worked so I can.
Well, I can comment on that right now. Actually,
you got
both in Cinnamon and in Mate. That's one difference between XFCE. XFCE you can do multi-monitor, but you're gonna roll up your sleeves a little bit. It's a little more work. But with Mate and Cinnamon, just use the provided tools. It's really simple. I didn't even use a proprietary driver. Of course, I couldn't, so it really wasn't an issue. The two monitors behind me right now, I don't think the computer's on, but I actually have that setup running just fine. No problem. Yeah. Bam, bam.
Bam, bam. All right. Well, we went down a lot of different routes, but I think it's an interesting experiment. There's a big debate, I think, building. Obviously, you saw a little bit take place between us in the chat room regarding when you diverge from Ubuntu, a lot of people jump to OpenSUSE or Arch.
Sure.
I think Mint is a great stepping stone because you maintain that compatibility, and if you browse the same web I do, you'll find that to be an advantage. If you browse the web that Arch users use, you don't find that to be an advantage. And I understand that works fine for you, and I don't hold anything against you for that. But I think If you want that compatibility, but you're just a little nervous about the direction they're going, or you just want a refuge while they work things out over at Canonical, go check out Mint 15. It's going to be one of their best releases, I think.
I think that's the real core. If you're a fan of the Ubuntu base, if you're a fan of PPAs, Mint makes a lot of sense. If you're someone that is ready to try something completely new and different, check out Arch, check out Gentoo, check out Slackware, whatever. Check out some more advanced distributions. It really just depends on where you're at as far as your interests.
You know what I need to do probably is like take an Arch challenge. Right? I need to just buckle down.
I think that's fair.
And use it for like a week and see if I still have the same application compatibility. Compatibility isn't the right word. Application discovery and ease of setup. I don't know what the right word is there.
I think flow. I think workflow, because I mean, the thing that Arch has in its favor is it's bleeding edge, rocket fast. It's like being on top of a missile. The thing's crazy. So it has those advantages. But I think the things to really gauge is setup. How. I hesitate to use the word simple, but how fluid is the setup? How much extra configuration are you putting into it? Is that enough to bother you? Is it enough that it feels natural? I think you kind of feel where you're at with it. I think that'd be interesting.
Mail Hauler in our IRC chat room says he's got Mint on 3 of his computers and he's loving it. So it's worth checking out. All right. Cool. Well, that's the Linux Action Show's look at Mint 15. On this week's /Etsy, I want to talk about video games. I've had the urge to solve some puzzles, defend some towers, and shoot some things. So we're going to cover those in this week's segment. But first, I want to thank our /Etsy sponsor, Untangle. Untangle makes some awesome firewalls that work flawlessly once you have them installed. You can set it and forget it, as I like to say. You can get like their U-Series appliance up and running in 10 minutes. Even if you're not a network wizard, that's what I love about Untangle is it takes the power of Linux, which out there as an audience member of the Linux Action Show, Linux makes a fantastic firewall and router. Imagine if you could put that in an appliance, you could harness that power, wrap it in a very nice dashboard, and then bundle it with not only some fantastic support, but some great service offerings. Go over to untangle.com and look at their different software packages, content filtering, network performance, remote access, completely secure and encrypted, live support. All of those things come bundled in. And if you use our code LAST20 when you check out, when you're getting one of these packages, you'll save 20% on your order. Untangle is a beautiful example of how you can take the power of Linux, combine it with some ease of use, wrap around a nice support package, and really make something compelling for the enterprise or for anyone, really. Go check out untangle.com and use our code LAST20 when you're checking out to save yourself some money on the Untangle services. And thank you to Untangle for sponsoring /Etsy. Let's start with the video games. The first one I want to talk about is Dungeon Defenders. Now, Dungeon Defenders is a tower defense action RPG. And I like this in the sense that you get down there, and here's the idea. It's got a first-person type shooter. You build your defenses, you set them all up, and then you execute. And it's got a nice pace to it, so you can pull all that off. Dungeon Defenders falls a little short for me, though, in playing it because there's a lot of upsells they try to get you into. And I understand that that's sort of the new economy for these video game makers, but as a Linux user, I'm not very used to that. I'm either used to getting a game for free or paying for it once, and then our relationship is done. I own it. There's no upsells. Dungeon Defenders is not quite like that. It's $14.99 on Steam, and then once you buy it, there's quite a bit of upsells you can get, as well as downloadable content. Not necessarily a bad thing, especially when you can do some nice things that might enhance your gameplay, and there's an online gameplay component, which could make it play for a long time. So it's not necessarily a bad investment if you enjoy this kind of game, but it's something you got to consider. Next up, I wanted to fly around in outer space. Who doesn't? That's where X3 comes in. They just released the Abion Prelude. They have a whole bunch of downloadable content packs, but the one I'm going to focus on today is the main X3 game, the Terran Conflict. Now, Terran Conflict is beautiful. It's a little tricky, but you can hook up your joystick and you can really get in. It takes place in the year 2938. The long-wished-for encounter of the X universe and Earth holds both joy and sorrow for the people. Despite flourishing trade, the clash of diverse races, cultures, and life forms creates new tensions, mistrust, and open conflict that you have to overcome. You're going to want to spend some time in the tutorial in this one because it's got all of the things you might expect from a little more realistic space shooter. And again, the nice thing about Terran Conflict is that's just the beginning. If you like it, you can buy this and you've got the whole game. If you like it, though, they keep coming out with downloadable content that you can buy for a pretty good price. One of the games I've heard from you guys the most is Don't Starve. What do you think of Don't Starve? So I took a look at Don't Starve, and I think it's my favorite of the bunch. It's fun. It's got a lot of interesting art elements to it. I only got to play it a little bit, and I'll tell you, immediately I was sort of struck by the overall style it has, and the concept is summed up in the name. Don't starve means you stay alive as long as you can. It's an uncompromising wilderness survival game full of science and magic, as they say. You play as Wilson, an intrepid gentleman scientist who has been trapped by a demon and transported to a mysterious wilderness world. Wilson must learn to exploit his environment and in the inhabitants of it if he ever hopes to escape and find his way back home. Now, let's talk about one more while we're talking about the pay games, and then we'll get to a free game. I want to talk about Shank 2. Maybe you've played Shank 1. Well, Shank 2 is out, and this is a side-scrolling slasher. I had a little bit of problems controlling this one. With my mouse, with my keyboard and mouse, I was only able to run right, or left, actually. And the whole game moves right, because it's a side-scroller. Once I hooked up my my Logitech gamepad here, my dual-action Logitech USB controller, the situation was a lot better with Shank 2. Wasn't perfect. I still had some issues trying to control him to get him to move over. I think that's because Linux support is still in beta. But Shank 2 is definitely a game that's my speed. You get in, you play, it's fast, it's fun, it's irreverent. It doesn't take itself too seriously is what I'm trying to say. And you can get in and start hacking and slashing right away. And then you unlock different things and level up as you move forward. So it's got some RPG to it, nowhere near the degree that Dungeon Defenders has. I mean, Dungeon Defenders is straight up a full-on RPG game where you are really going to want to follow the tutorial, where Shank 2 is really a side-scroll slasher, and that's what I love about it. But last and not least, and I want to say a special thank you to KeyMarkerX in our subreddit. He suggested we check out Mindtest. He said Mindtest is an awesome game, obviously similar to Minecraft and Infinite Miner-based games. It's fully open source, however. It's available as a cross-platform game with a huge variety of mods, all of which are written in C++ and Lua. So no overhead of Java. I checked it out. Very simple to get set up and get going with Mindtest. You can start your own server locally and then just start playing in creative mode. That's what I decided to do. Or you can join other Mindtest servers. Is it a knockoff? Yes. Do I hate Java? Yes. So I'm okay with this. Obviously, I'm a huge Minecraft lover. We have a Minecraft server. You can go over the Jupiter Gaming, jbgame.tv, I believe it is, to get information on our Minecraft server. But when you have a success like this, but it's based on this closed technology, it is nice to see the open source community respond. As KeyMarkerX pointed out in our subreddit, the networking support's still a little buggy. I actually ran into a few bugs myself. Nothing I couldn't overcome, though, but it's something to check out. It's something to, if you're a Minecraft fan, to at least to keep an eye on, but it's not going to replace Minecraft for you just yet. So we'll have links to all of those in the show notes. Back to you guys. Matt, last week we stirred the pot a little bit, and we got a lot of feedback, and it definitely spanned the whole range. We got some rage quitters who said they'll never tune into the show, and they canceled their support subscriptions and uninstalled the affiliate browser, to emails saying we were kind of on par with what they were thinking. And a lot of it had to do where we were centering around how people are sort of going after Canonical and Ubuntu for what they're trying. Right. And I think the thing that upset people the most, just kind of distilling down a lot of the feedback we got, was people felt like we weren't giving enough consideration to the incompatibilities down the road that Ubuntu, Mir, Unity, things like that might introduce to the ecosystem for Linux applications. Right. I think we did touch on that, but it's a fair point to sort of reiterate that is something to keep an eye on. But I would sort of follow up with, while it's definitely worth being a watchdog for those concerns, right now those are a might happen, right? They're not a have happened.
That's kind of my takeaway, is that I don't necessarily at this stage anyway see a concern, and that could definitely change, but we're not there yet, because we really don't know what's going to happen. And so I'm choosing to go in with an open mind and kind of weigh out everything out as we go. We'll see what happens.
You got some heat, though, because you were like, hey, if you don't like it, don't use it, move on. And some people were like, oh, hey man, I don't have that option, because if they are peeing in my pond, then that affects me. And I think some people didn't like the, hey, if you don't like it, move on aspect of it. But it's because at this stage, that is your option, right? When it moves to that stage, then that's where I think people just want to maybe raise the stink before it gets there.
And my thing of it is that isn't a reflection on the person or anything like that. That's a reflection on, that's my view. I could be completely full of it and wrong, and I accept that if I am. But for myself, that's how I see it. It's like, I don't want to see, I don't want to see people investing a lot of negative energy in something when they could take positive thoughts and ideas and invest it into things they care about. And that's really what I'm getting at, is if you're passionate about your distribution, put some great energy in that, if you want to. I'm just saying that's my suggestion to you folks. That's all.
There's another comment that was left on our show page. It says, this guy takes issue with people comparing OS 10 and FreeBSD. OS 10 is not FreeBSD with a GUI.
Fair.
And and I think that point even further illustrates how Ubuntu is not really becoming the new OS 10, but maybe something else entirely new.
That's fair. Yeah.
I thought we got a great email from Jameson. He wrote in, he said, the issue I see with Ubuntu's decreasing compatibility with other Linux distribution, and I think that's a great way to put it, decreasing compatibility, right? Because it kind of is that in some ways.
I would agree with that.
He says, the fact is that certain proprietary software is being packaged specifically for Ubuntu, being the most popular distro out there, e.g. Steam, Lightworks. This is a problem for anyone not running Ubuntu who uses these applications, because if Ubuntu diverges far enough, they will no longer be compatible with the distribution of choice. P.S. AUFS isn't a copy-on-write file system, it's a unioning file system. I thought I was getting that wrong.
Okay. Well, appreciate the correction. And that's an interesting point.
Yeah, doesn't this kind of touch back on what we were just talking about with Arch a little bit?
I think so. But I also think that on the flip side of that, as we saw with like Steam specifically, is that granted it was really aimed at Ubuntu initially, but we've seen it. I think it's now in the Arch repos.
Very rapidly so, and then they took it out for legal reasons.
And so
I mean, in fact, the only delay was really because of legal issues, not because of technical issues.
Sure.
And because of that, Matt and I we were having quite a conversation offline with the chat room. And we're both next week. We're gonna after the show's over, we're gonna take the Arch challenge. We're gonna run Arch for a week, and we'll report our results. We were, in the stream, not recorded. The chat room was telling us a little bit more about the Arch user repository and potentially how you can point that at a GitHub or SourceForge repo if they have a package build file, and it might actually be a sufficient replacement for PPAs. And we've seen important software get ported over to different distributions like Steam. Steam's a great example. I think what will be interesting to watch is Lightworks, and what direction does that take as far as distro compatibility? And does that make it over to other distros? And does that show up in the repos and things like that? All right.
Yeah, that will be interesting. But yes, Arch Challenge, looking forward to that. And definitely want to give a shout out to the chat room and actually offering to answer some of the questions we had about Arch specifically. Once we got past the differences of opinion, we had some great feedback, and I really want to give you guys a shout out for that.
Yeah, that was great. All right, Not Bryant writes in. Says, hey guys, just caught this last week's episode and I really enjoyed both your takes on the whole Canonical becoming Apple issue. I agree with almost everything you two said, especially the part about the ridiculous fanboy hyperbole. That's where I was just kind of saying, and I think I may be upset a few people, is sometimes I feel like when somebody just calls somebody a fanboy, they're trying to discount any credibility they have for liking something. Well, of course you like that, you're a fanboy. And I think that's a disservice and doesn't give a fair intellectual examination of what the person's saying. And it seems like Not Bryant agreed with that. However, I do think that some of what Matt said misses the bigger picture. At one point, he said that if Ubuntu causes companies to write software for Ubuntu instead of Linux, we would have to just deal with it. But that's really where we're at right now with developers working on non-Linux platforms instead of Linux. In that, the way I understand it, why people think Canonical might hurt Linux overall, taking one giant step sideways in terms of drawing developers to the platform. I don't personally see any evidence that this will happen, but I think it's at least important to bear in mind. Always keep up the great work. Love the show and the topics you guys bring to the table. Also, Matt, you really don't like Dr. Pepper? Negative in the freedom soda dimension.
I'm famous for years now, and I always take the unpopular view on pretty much everything, and I don't mean to. It just kind of happens. With the Dr. Pepper thing, that's a great example of that.
Controversial to the end, Matt.
I know. I'm always on the edge. Boy, that's an interesting point. With the whole Ubuntu situation and where developers are going to end up, I think it's just one of those things we're going to have to wait and see. I'm cautiously optimistic in that we get developers interested in Ubuntu, and that's a fine place for them to start. But then we also find that they loosen up their licensing and rights and whatnot to where we can begin getting this stuff on Arch and begin getting on OpenSUSE and Fedora and these other platforms, these other distributions. I'm hopeful for that. So I'm choosing to be cautiously optimistic and maybe even a little delusional. I'll throw that out there as a possibility, but that's just me.
Well,
that's just me.
All right. Last email comes in from Mike that we're going to get to today. It says, gentlemen, great show. My first question, after hundreds of hours of listening to this show, what is your recommendation for a laptop purchase for the sole purpose of running Linux on it? I'm not a gamer, but I still have pretty big gun needs. Is AMD a better choice than Intel? I've heard that the latest generation of Intel chips are not accommodating to Linux's previous versions. I want to avoid saying price is no option, but realistically, it isn't. I'm not a gamer, nor do I intend to ever be during the expected lifetime of this unit. I necessarily eliminate the need for that necessarily eliminates the need for high-end graphics, and therefore one of the most expensive upgrades. That said, I'd like to drive at least 2 displays, and I hardly think that's a limiting factor this day. He says he owns several desktops and laptops. His preferred being a Lenovo i7, but his build quality is poor, and it barely puts up with Linux. Thanks in advance for your suggestions. Now, if Mike has really listened to hundreds of Linux Action Show, doesn't he just think we're going to say System 76?
Well, I would say System 76. I also, just to be ultimately fair, System 76 is my personal go-to.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
that's just, we know it's going to work. There are other Linux vendors out there.
A laptop specifically with the purpose of running Linux.
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah, and you're wanting to attach a monitor and all that sort of stuff. I'm definitely going to say probably go with the System 76. Otherwise, you can go with any Intel-based system coming from another Linux vendor. But I would personally, if you don't want any surprises or gotchas down the road, I'm going to say go with a Linux vendor specifically. That would be my suggestion.
Especially if it's going to be like a 3 or 4 year system. I mean, something you're going to hang on to for a while because they support, they keep doing the updates for a while. I would say yes. In my personal opinion right now, I think Intel's got a better overall solution for laptops, especially when it comes to power use and performance. I think Intel's killing there. The Intel graphics chips have never been better supported under Linux. And if you don't need gaming, man, those Intel graphics can provide, well, not always, actually. I've been bit a couple times by Intel graphics bugs, but ideally, they will provide a very smooth process because Intel themselves are developing code for that for Linux. It's funny how I've actually been bitten by a couple of Intel graphics bugs, but all in all, it's been the most hassle-free.
But that's also where your vendor comes in. So this is where people taking it on themselves, they're on their own. If you are going with a vendor like System 76, you have a resource to go to and say, hey, I'm dealing with this issue. They'll either provide you with a workaround, or they may actually end up providing some solution via their System 76 driver. You just never know.
So. People in the chat room like the X1 Carbon.
Yep.
The thing that's tough is Haswell's about to come out. A new generation of HD graphics from Intel's about to come out. Now is, like, if you need a machine, you need a machine. I mean, I'm not saying don't buy one, but if you can wait until after June, wait till June, I think you're going to see some Haswell chips hit the market, and then you might want to consider checking those out, because they've already released the code for those chips for Linux. Like, the code's already out there, the Wi-Fi chipset code's already out there for the chipset, so that should be pretty rocking.
Important consideration.
All right, so I was tweeted over the week at Chris LAS, hey, Chris, do you know any good job boards for open source Linux jobs? Oh. And so I didn't know any right off the top of my head that people still used actively. So I put out the call, and I got a couple. One came from Coder Monkey. He recommended jobs.linux.com and also linux.org/jobs. I'll have these linked in the show notes. Also, by the way, the Free Software Foundation has a job posting, just fsf.org/resources/jobs/listings. Easy to remember.
That works.
I guess we'll have that linked in the show notes too. And let's see what else. There was a couple other ones. But those are here. I wanted to open up. Here it is. Yeah, here it is. And if you're in the UK, we've even got one for the UK. Here it is. linuxrecruit.co.uk/jobs.
Well, that's easy to remember.
Yep. Well, but there's postings. It looks like a lot for London in here.
That makes sense.
There's Belgium in here. So
sure.
You got senior system admin, sysops, system administrator, contract job, DevOps, lots of different stuff. And then there's about
good
4
opportunities to get their feet in the door, I think, right?
Yeah, I know. And didn't Slashdot have a jobs board for a while?
I think so.
Yeah.
I haven't looked in a while, but I do recall them having one at one point.
So I will link to my Twitter stream that had a bunch of good recommendations in there. If you guys are out there looking for some Linux jobs and you know some resources, we have a discussion thread. We had a huge discussion thread around last week's, and I wanted to read some of them, but just the feedback segment would be forever.
Yeah.
Every episode of Linux Action Show is cross-posted to linuxactionshow.reddit.com, and then, like last week, we had like almost 100 comments in that discussion thread, and you guys can go in there and throw in any kind of feedback that relates to this episode, and links to job boards would be awesome in there.
Yeah.
And now, here comes the Steam game giveaway. I got a whole bunch of Steam games to give away. I got like 6 games to give away.
All right.
And we're going to give away 2 on the live stream today for people who've tuned in live, and I think we're going to give away probably about 2 on the subreddit. And here are the requirements for the subreddit giveaway. I'm pulling up my games that I have in my library right now. Because you know in Steam, like every now and then they have like these crazy good sales.
Right. And you just got to snatch them up.
Yeah, and then sometimes they have like buy a pack.
Oh, nice.
So that's what I've been doing a couple times. So I'm going to be giving away Portal, Guns of Icarus Online, Don't Starve, which I just covered in the /Etsy segment, Cave Story, Stealth Bastard, and Anomaly 2. So we're going to let's start with for the subreddit folks. If you would record have you heard it, Matt? Are you familiar with this term, Let's Play?
Yes,
where it's like a screen cap of what you're playing,
right?
With commentary.
Yeah. It's supposed to be pretty awesome, actually.
People seem to like them. I think it'd be a good way to expose some Linux games to people. So if there's a game that the Linux Action Show has never really talked about, like our Hall of Shame, and it's a game you love and you want to give a little exposure, close, open, and pay a little, maybe some more points for free. And if you will do a Let's Play, record it, upload it to YouTube or whatever video site you want, and link it in the subreddit. Because the reason why I want you to the subreddit is so I have a way to get a hold of you. Link it in our subreddit. I'll be picking from a few of those to give away some Steam codes to. And there might only be a couple of people that do this, to be honest with you, because this is not a necessarily easy thing to do. I'm asking for a lot here. So if you are motivated to do it, I suggest you do it, because you might be one of the few that does it, and your chances are pretty good of winning. So just go do a Let's Play of your favorite game, one that doesn't get talked about enough here on the Linux Action Show, and then post a link to it in the subreddit. And I'll give away a copy of Steam to a couple of those people who do that.
Nice.
And that'll be in the next week's episode of Linux Action Show. Don't forget, you can email us, linuxactionshow@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or hit the contact link at the top of our website and choose Linux Action Show from the drop-down, or even better, just start a thread in our subreddit, like I just mentioned. Matt, what are you up to this week?
As always, you can find me at datamation.com. Scroll down to open source. Click up in there. Latest article, I believe, is going to be Ubuntu versus Windows.
What?
I believe that was the latest.
You so controversial, man.
I am so controversial. Although I did get some compliments on being fair.
Oh, yeah?
I was very, very fair. Very fair throughout the whole thing. I didn't take a side on one thing or the other. I'm not necessarily, like I said, I'm not a real fanboy of either. So I was pretty agnostic about it. And I think people saw that. Freestyle
in the chat room asks if it's only Steam games. Nope, any game. Any game.
Ooh,
any
hey,
game.
There you go.
I'm only giving away Steam games because that's what I have codes for. But you can submit any game, a free game, an open source free game, a proprietary game, whatever you want, just something that's got enough attention. I have two things I wanted to just kind of pimp before we get out of here because I'm pretty proud of them. Number one, this week's episode of Plan B, episode 7. This was awesome. We had Ben Morse on. He plugged his trip to the Bitcoin 2013 Future of Payments Conference. Very interested to see what's going on there. And I also spoke with Amir Taki, who is an open source developer who's creating something called LibBitcoin, which is going to be included in the Debian repos, and it's going to be an open source reimplementation of what a lot of the Bitcoin client stuff does. A very fascinating talk. He talks a little bit about kernel stuff in there too. A little bit on the Linux side. Great talk if you want to get a geeky. And it was just an overall great episode of Plan B if you haven't heard that yet. And then I also want to mention Unfilter, episode 51. We're almost at the 1 year mark with Unfilter, and we just had a great episode where we covered a lot of the wiretapping scandals that are going on right now, and there's this crazy CIA spy getting outed in Russia story, some real James Bond spy stuff going on in real life that we've been covering, just I don't know, just stuff you'd think is only in the movie. So go check both those out. I have them linked in the show notes if you want a little extra something for your commute. You haven't checked those out before?
Definitely.
I recommend those are good episodes to jump in. All right, well, don't forget the Linux Action Show is live on Sundays over at jblive.tv and jblive.info for the audio. You can join us at 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. UTC, and you can help us pick our titles. And like this week, way more extra show. We had some good conversations with the chat room, and we're going to give away 2 copies of Steam once the show's over. So always fun to join us live if you can over at jblive.tv. All right, everyone, thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Linux Action Show. We'll see you right back here next week. Super Spaz. Hi everybody, Super Spaz, Chris here. Chris with Super Spaz here to tell you all about being a spaz. Let me tell you, Super Spaz. You see, my problem is, Matt, is way in the future.